Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica, Content Marketing Associate for the Paris Blockchain Week Summit. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today to the Building a Best-in-Class Blockchain Production Application webinar brought to you by Cognizant. We would like to thank Cognizant, first of all, for making the webinar possible. Thank you so much. And of course, to our speakers for joining us today. So I'm proud to introduce our panelists. First, we have Karen Otani from Hyperledger, Andrei Semenov from Kona Services, which is a Coca-Cola system IT services company, Antoine Lefebvre from Suez Smart and Environmental Solutions, and Arka Roy-Choudhury, Senior Architect and Blockchain at Cognizant, who's going to moderate the discussion. Thank you all for joining us. And everyone, all the attendees, please, just to let you know, at the end, Arka is going to open the discussion for a question and answer session. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat directly at the bottom of your screen, and we will check them at the end. Okay, now I'm going to hand the discussion over to Arka. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica, for this wonderful introduction. So it is a privilege, to be among such distinguished leaders who are shaping this blockchain ecosystem and navigating the practical challenges on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure that the audience who have joined us here today will enjoy every bit of it and will have valuable insights to take home. So I am Arka Roy-Choudhury. I work for the Cognizant blockchain practice. And just a brief introduction about Cognizant. So we are a leading professional company, transforming operating business and technology models for the digital era. And our bouquet of DLT services include advisory, business process rationalization, solution development, and of course, system integration. And we are particularly proud of our ability to productionize and deploy blockchain solution at scale. So I'll be your moderator for today. And why don't I do this? I'll with one by one in a clockwise direction, if it were a clockwise direction, and then come back in an anti-clockwise direction. So I'll start with Karen. Karen, I think we know each other for some time now, but for the sake of this panel, we'll start all over again. So Karen, as a director of ecosystem at Hyperledger, you have been passionately cultivating a 260 member plus ecosystem comprising of large, medium, and small enterprises, and also includes nonprofits, governments, and universities. And I'm sure you've seen this ecosystem evolve in terms of technology and the business utility that it aims to address. And please tell us ways in which this ecosystem is evolving at present, especially keeping in mind this COVID-19 situation. And maybe you can touch upon the general trends that you're observing, and maybe take some examples of practical production-grade solution as well.
Well, I'll see if I can address all of those things, at least throughout the hour, maybe not in one go. Yeah. So, Hyperledger celebrated its 5-year anniversary back in December, and we're approaching our 6-year anniversary. And things have evolved, of course, significantly since December 2016, when there were just 30 founding members for the Hyperledger project, as it was called at that time. We started off with 2 code bases that were contributed, Hyperledger Fabric, that were open source and contributed by a group of companies, Hyperledger Fabric and Hyperledger Sawtooth. And since then, we've grown now to 16 different projects. There are 6 DLTs, and then the rest are a number of tools and libraries. And so even just there, you can see how much the community has evolved since then. Enterprise blockchain has exploded. There's been, a lot of exploration. First of all, first more education, exploration in terms of pilots and POCs. And then that's evolved into, many different production deployments. Several of these code bases have reached production status, so 1.0 status. Hyperledger Fabric has reached a long-term support, 2.2. So we've got inspiration coming from the Ethereum community through Hyperledger Burrow and Hyperledger Besu that are part of our community. And so there's been, you know, a real evolution. You know, if you remember the conversations in 2017, you know, it was back in the ICO craze, there was very much this like either or, you know, public, private, who's gonna win, and it was like Hyperledger versus Ethereum, and I think that has matured and progressed in the way that we've always seen it. Really, is that there was never a versus one or the other for us, because we've always been really, our goal has always been to create enterprise grade, open source, distributed ledger technologies that facilitate business transactions. And we provide an open, neutral, community-driven infrastructure that's supported by a technical and business governance for that end. And so we build these technical communities that then go and build the POCs, the use cases, the trials and deployments. And so for us, it's like whatever goes in the direction, fulfills those goals, should be a part of our community. So like I said earlier, you know, the Ethereum community is very much a part of Hyperledger now. And I think, you know, people recognize more now that there's a spectrum of what you need in terms of your use cases, in terms of what you need in terms of speed and scalability and privacy and security, et cetera. And, you know, there isn't going to be one thing that fits it all. You're going to have to use a few different things and connect them. And I think that's more where we're getting towards now in terms of like trends. To touch on that is the importance of those connections, the importance of integrations between networks or interoperability between networks. And I think that that was a topic that was more hypothetical. People knew that it was needed, but they're so busy just trying to build the thing itself that they couldn't really focus on how to connect to others yet. And I think now we're getting to that point where it's like, okay, we've got our ecosystem now. Let's see how we can bridge across network. And so there are a number of interoperability projects and initiatives happening at Hyperledger and with Hyperledger using Hyperledger technologies. We've got 3 different projects. One is Hyperledger Cactus, which is an integration protocol. That's a project. And then we have 2 Hyperledger labs. One is called Weaver and one is called UE. And those 2 are also focused on interoperability as well. Labs is a place in the Hyperledger community where they're not a fully fledged project yet. It's a little bit more early and still in development, but they get support from our community. And so what we're doing is facilitating those 3 projects to coordinate amongst each other to bring together some of those efforts.
Exactly. I think I like the part where you just mentioned that Ethereum is a part of your community as well. And what you're trying to get at is like this, I like this dynamic culture of collaboration, which is essential for driving adoption, you know, driving the network effect. I think I think you would also agree that this driving this network effect through interoperability, through collaboration, through a network of networks is essential, you know, to eventually drive the adoption of blockchain in the bigger business ecosystem. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's part of the ethos. You know, Hyperledger is a project, a part of the Linux Foundation, which is you know, one of the largest open source software initiatives in the world. And so what our aim is always really to let's come together and build the common infrastructure, the things that are not unique to a specific implementation or a service provider, but the thing that everybody can leverage to advance advance enterprise blockchain, to advance the development of use cases. That's what our goal is so that not every, it's a waste of time. Developer time is expensive. It's a waste of time to start from scratch. And so we're here as a home where you can leverage, tested enterprise grade technologies to take off and build your use case and get further faster. Absolutely.
Time to market has been essential. And I think you mentioned 16 projects at this point running.
Yes. Yes.
That is awesome. I think we will have more question on the ecosystem part, but why don't I do this? I'll, hand over to Anton for some time and then come back to you. And please feel free to, at any time to interject and add your point of view as well.
Will do.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. So now coming back to Anton, and I hope I'm calling your name correctly. So Anton, you are the CEO of Digital Solutions, Citizen, Consumer, and Companies line of business for Suez. And you are responsible for developing new business models, designing new digital services, and enhancing customer experiences with technology intervention. And I believe that blockchain plays an important role in this technical intervention. So, help us, or rather tell us why Suez decided to work on blockchain.
Sure. Hello, Arka. Hello, everybody. Very happy to be with you. Thank you very much for the invitations.
Our privilege.
As you know, Suez is an international leader in environment, and basically we provide solutions in waste management, water management, and since 2 years in air quality management. We believe that to address the current environmental crisis, the standard solution are not enough, and we need to put innovation to find new solutions to the current challenges. And part of this innovation will be based on digital solution, and we have already some concrete example where digital help to do more with less. And we started the blockchain journey within Suez 2 or 3 years ago, and indeed it was a perfect match between two trends, if I may. The first one is we recognize that if we like to have a very important impact in environmental solutions, we need to first foster the collaboration between actors. And by actors, I mean the private sectors, Suez and other companies, industrials, the public sector, government, and so on, citizens, non-governmental organizations. And to foster this collaboration, we need to increase the level of trust and the sharing of information. And obviously, when we say more collaboration and more trust, the question of blockchain comes up. And we were quite interested by what we have seen in other B2B market with the usage of blockchain, such as in the food industry, in the transport industry. So the next question for us was how to make sure that the blockchain could provide something new in our roadmap in the environmental solution. So the first challenge for us was to prove the concept, and Karen mentioned some POCs and so on. So we started by POCs, and these POCs was very successful. And we move it to a project and to a sales solution to help us deploying to our customers. So today we transform this POC in a solution, but that was not enough. And we decided end of last year to launch a platform that we call Circular Chain, standing for the blockchain of the circular economy. That was like the second level of our roadmap. And the third one was our vision is to say that the next step in the environmental sector is maybe the creation of blockchain consortium, as we see in other environment. Today, from a lineage, there is no such consortium in the environmental sector, while we believe that will be the future. So this is something that we are promoting in different ways. Yes, and yeah.
So I think you are also looking at blockchain as, the way I look at it is a fabric of trust, which is essential for rather a foundational technology which fosters collaboration. I guess, do you also agree that what you're trying to develop is this sort of fostering multiple players in your ecosystem to come collaborate, share data, where they're trusted by every action, anybody who wants to take an action on it, and then use it and to do something or create an intervention which is positively going to impact the society. Is that how you're looking at blockchain?
Yeah, I think that basically this is what the blockchain will bring. And we have designed a very simple tool to decide when we have a use case if we need to move to blockchain or not. And the first question is obviously is the question we would like to address is Suez only or will be solved with all the actors of the ecosystem and the value chain. And the second question obviously is, do we have a trust issue that we need to solve? And in that case, we move on blockchain implementation. To be concrete, maybe I can give you a concrete example of
exactly. That was my question. Give me some concrete. And you have covered the roadmap very well. The way I understand the roadmap is you started with a POC, you validated the both the use cases and perhaps the technology as well. And then once you validated it, you moved on to a circular chain, which is your proprietary platform. And now you're looking into driving adoption, or rather what I say, the network effect, by asking other people to collaborate, by other consortium members, stakeholders to join. And in a way, sort of fostering competition, competition among competitors, if that is required, if that's the right word, but basically asking everyone to join and share the data, share the information, and collaborate. But that's a fascinating roadmap. But yeah, please go ahead and share some of the examples of some concrete examples.
Just to share you a concrete example, which is really at the crossroad of our two historical businesses, maybe waste and water. I don't know if you have ever asked yourself what become your wastewater when they leave your home or your flat. Basically, they are collected and they are treated by what we call a wastewater plants. And the two outputs of this wastewater plant is clean water, which going back to the environment, and with what we call sludge. And sludge, it's a very powerful fertilizer. It contains a lot of organic matter, such as phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon. And in France, in many countries, this sludge are sprayed on soil, and that really help agriculture and farmers to reduce their consumption of artificial nitrogen, mine phosphorus, and doing this will limit the usage of those natural resources. But for this closed loop and very environmental friendly loop to work, we need to make sure that the traceability is perfect. And we build this blockchain traceability from the plant to the plot, to the farm, with the different actors, which are basically the plant, the transporter, the lab, the municipalities, citizens, to have a perfect monitoring of those of this process and this value chain. And doing this, we help contributing to having more spreading of sludge, increasing the return to the soil of the nutrient contains in the wastewaters. And what we do envisage for the next step is obviously to replicate this process and this concept for other type of waste that need to become new resources for the economy.
Absolutely, and I truly believe the critical, or rather efficient utilization of natural resources is critical at this juncture, especially when climate action, the requirement for positive climate action is so essential in our world. And I'm so glad that a company like you, and you especially with all the enthusiasm that you bring to the table, I'm sure we are going to see great projects coming up with blockchain. And I'll come to you again, Anton, but let me now go to Andre. So Andre, so you are the Director of Innovation Supply Chain at Kona. And if I quote correctly from Forbes, Kona or Coke One North America is moving orders and shipments between bottlers to the blockchain and will eventually include external suppliers of raw materials, aluminum cans, and more. Well, that sounds really like a massive at-scale operations to me. Why don't you help us understand your journey so far? What does it feel like to have such massive operations on blockchain, and maybe share some of the challenges that you routinely face to run this operations.
Absolutely, Arka. And first of all, thanks for inviting me to this event. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Jessica. And,
my privilege, as I said, my privilege.
Happy to be here. And before I start, just wanted to touch base a little bit on what the Coca-Cola bottling system looks like, right? It's not everybody knows, but this is a franchise system where the different Coca-Cola bottlers, distributors operate in the local territories, and they work directly with their customers. And there are different sizes of bottlers, and typically they operate as a consumers and vendors to each other, where they produce specific product portfolios and they deliver to others. And in North America specifically, Kona, or Coke One North America, as you mentioned, works with 12 largest Coca-Cola bottlers that when we provide them core solutions to run the bottling business, starting with the manufacturing, buying materials, manufacturing, and then storing in the warehouse, and then distributing the Coca-Cola products to the end customers, which are the stores, big retailers, convenience stores, and others. So we provide, as Kona, we provide this end-to-end solution. And then we have an innovation group within Kona who is responsible really to seek after some of the opportunities that exist in the current business processes, and leverage the edge technologies like IoT, AI, machine learning, blockchain, including to optimize and drive the growth of the revenue or optimization of costs in the blockchain community. And blockchain being one of the technologies that we saw an opportunity for us to build this trusted network among the bottlers in North America, who are playing the role of a customer and a supplier to each other. And we're about 2-3 days shy of being a 2 years production network on the Hyperledger Fabric. We went live initially with just the 2 bottlers operating on the blockchain. And even though they are Coca-Cola bottlers, right, they're still different companies, different legal entities, and they run on different platforms if we don't take just the Kona bottlers. And what we decided to do is build this trusted network that would connect the bottlers in North America and help them help bring transparency, validation, and trust into their supply chain transactions. And we started this project really as a business problem. So we had the business leads, going to gather them in the room and going to present the opportunity to build a network in the first place, ran through a few proof of concepts, and then deliver the network in production that we're currently expanding to other participants. So I think, one of the first lessons learned that we want to start not necessarily with the technology first and then try to apply the use case there, but really work the use case and solve the problem that I think blockchain is solving perfectly. And if I were to just summarize what we're doing, is really we're trying to synchronize the system of records, right? So all we want to do and bring an incentive and the way, how do we do this in a secure way, scalable way that everybody can participate?
Absolutely. And if I may interject over there a little, I think you also alluded to other emerging technologies like IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning. You also perhaps see a lot of convergence of these technologies, because I have, through my experience, what I've seen is a lot of times, especially in the supply chain domain, what is happening is we are integrating, or rather, we are seeing a convergence of multiple technologies coming to it. For example, IoT for sensing the real world, smart contracts to executing a certain contract based on a real world parameter coming from the IoT, and machine learning and AI doing some kind of classification of triage to solve certain business problems. Are you also seeing such convergence?
Absolutely, and this is the must-have. The blockchain will not solve accuracy issues. The blockchain will not solve a human error issues. And what we're doing with blockchain is we're calling out these issues if they don't reconcile on the blockchain. When two participants are sending different data to the blockchain, we're using this as a reconciliation layer. However, in order for us to avoid doing any human errors, definitely the use of edge compute, computer vision, machine learning would help to become this oracle and the verifier of the real data before digitize and put it in a smart contract to make sure that this is accurate. So this is absolutely spot on, and definitely we're looking into these areas as well.
Wonderful. So, allow me to stretch this conversation a little. So I'll now go from you towards the others. So, and then continuing with this discussion, what are some of the real world production grade business challenges, if I may ask? You may have also evolved from POCs, so initial phases of pilot and MVPs, to a production grade solution. And I recall that what you mentioned, that you're just shy of 2 years into being production. And if you ask me personally, that is in dog years. If you count it, is 20 years of real world production experience compared to any other legacy system, that the benchmark that we have in legacy systems. So you may have faced these real world challenges. Why don't you enlighten us with some of those challenges? And I would also like to know, as you continue, some of the opportunities that you have. What you see, not just for yourself, but for anybody who is, or any organization that is starting on blockchain. You can take an example of supply chain or any industry, that is fine. But two questions: one is the real problems that you face, and second is opportunities that you see.
Yeah, I'd say as we grow the network, and we on purpose pick the use case that we're doing right now, is because we can operate in the environment. We can work with the participants of the network as a consortium and incentivize them to join the network relatively easy. Now, the challenges that we're seeing, if you go beyond this network and you want to extend this logically to your suppliers and customers, the challenges that we're seeing is that with the private permission blockchains, everybody is building their own networks. And what Karen was talking about is now the projects of a Hyperledger across network interoperability, or what some of the services that help us communicate to other networks. So I see this twofold, right? The challenges being technically, how do you solve this? And then secondly, how do you incentivize other potential participants of the network to include into your network, and eventually to meet this network effect that will help solve much larger use cases than were tackled in the beginning.
Yeah, indeed. And with incentivization, what brings to my mind is, the idea that, or the decision that you make with, or the rather trade-off that you make, whether to join a network or to build your own network. I guess somewhere on the course you also have to face such decisions or make such choices.
Yeah, I think since we're already the operator of the network, for us, it's a different question. Is you have another participant with a similar network, right? Now it's the question is, it's not who will give up our own network and join another network, is how do we operate with each other. But definitely, if there's a participant without network operations, right, their ideas would be, do I join this consortium? Do I join another consortium? Do I join this private network? And I think this also confuses organizations and maybe not necessarily driving the adoption of the technology by them, because they're afraid that if they join a particular network, they might not be able to scale it in future, right?
Yeah, I guess that's where Karen's question, I'll come to Karen again, but that's where the interoperability will come into fore, as and when we mature, that we need these networks to talk to each other, to communicate with each other, and not restrict ourselves to one single network, one single technology silo. I guess that's where we'll get at. So, and I know we talked about both the challenges as well as some of the priorities that you have and the opportunities that you have. Any specific, guidelines or rather advice that you have to a newbie joining blockchain?
Yeah, I think the advice is just to stay connected in this community. Don't be afraid to experiment, to keep proof of concept. I know that was a lot of proof of concepts in the beginning, and then there was a little bit of a decline, which is natural. And try to understand what business problems you're trying to solve first, and maybe see if blockchain is not the technology you want to use, and kind of make build this questionnaire, what Antoine said, have a survey that would define whether the specific use case will be applicable for using this technology. Because absolutely, the blockchain is will have the data redundancy in place, right? It has a much more complex infrastructure into it. So if there's no issue of trust, or you're not working with the multiple participants and it's a use case within your own organization, you don't really need to use that. So think about this and just understand whether you really need to use it. And once you synchronize the system of records using blockchain, once you're using the same standards, same processes, once you're using this automation, I think after that, you'll see there will be some more interesting use cases. And how do I start including a financial concept of using blockchain? How do I maybe revolutionize a little bit in the invoices space and the payment space, right? We're not doing this right now, but we're definitely keeping our eyes open and how to leverage this quality data with a proven document flow in future use cases.
Absolutely, and for the sake of time, I'll move on to Anton for now. But I did observe what you mentioned about standardization. This is very critical, and we also seen that. And coming to the financial part, contract automation, rather, driving letter of credit or credit source or working capital management solutions with blockchain naturally comes into play. But if we get time, we'll get back to those pointers as well. But now let me go to Anton. So same question, but from a perspective of, let's say, environmental and sustainability point of view. So what are the, say, real world priorities for you, or rather environmental priorities for you that can be solved by blockchain? And what are the untapped challenges that you see that can be leveraged by participants or enthusiasts coming into blockchain?
Sure. Well, basically, I believe that we are together facing three crises. The first one is obviously the climate change, and the recent report this summer of the IPCC reminds us that medicines such as we will not be able to meet the 1.5 trajectory, and we know that the 2.0 trajectory will be very hard to reach, and we already see and experience the impact of this climate change in our today life, and we see it this summer. So that's the first crisis we have together to solve. The second one is mainly, and this is a twin crisis, very similar to the first one, is related to the biodiversity. And today, hence, the International Congress of Biodiversity held in France reminded us that 1 million species are at risk over the 8 million species. And it's not only a species, but also our ability to live on the earth. And the last third crisis in the environment, but this is not the environment sector, that's for all of us, is the depletion of the natural resources. Is the one day to remind this year, in the 29th of July, where after this date, we have consumed more resources since the beginning of the year that the planet is able to provide this year. So we live on credits since the 19th of July. That's the reason why we believe we need really to accelerate to transition from a linear model based on a take, make, waste model to a more circular, where we make sure that every single resources will be reused and in the industry, and this is all about circular economy. And before being reused, there is a question of reducing our consumption, where blockchain can support. So that's very important crisis. Obviously, the answer will not be only with a digital solution. I think digital can support the resolution and solution for those crises, where I think that there is many things where blockchain can help. The first thing, as we already comment, and will not come back so much, is regarding trust and transparency. I love this comparison where we say that blockchain will bring the same level of disruption of one TCP/IP has bring to internet 20 years ago, but about how we share data and how the data ownership will be shared tomorrow. So definitely this will help. That will help also doing more regulation, more control. We do need more regulation in the environmental sectors, and maybe blockchain could help to do more regulation with less administrative tasks. So doing more regulation with more administrative tasks, that's easy, everybody can do it. But the question now that we face collectively, and behind this we face the issue that has been mentioned by Andre, is how to provide an efficiency on the value chain, not only on our own company, but more on the full value chain. And this is where we can expect blockchain to provide this additional efficiency, and how to share more data, to share trusted KPI and information on the environment shared by all actors. And surely blockchain will help on this. And the last point, obviously, we're all doing POC and we are all enthusiastic on those POCs, but in the environment, we need impact. We need to make sure that what we are doing will have a large-scale impact. We have seen that in other areas, like finance area, blockchain has had the ability to have a massive impact in a decade. And that's something that where the blockchain could help with a capability to scale maybe much faster than traditional solution. Obviously, that's not an easy way, and we are just starting the journey at Suez. And I think that there is some challenges that we need to collectively face. First, the awareness on blockchain, and this conference is a good point to raise awareness. And maybe in the environmental issues, the first one is we do a confusion between blockchain and Bitcoin. And while we believe that Bitcoin might be an environmental disaster in terms of energy consumption, we see that there is other type of blockchain, and Karen spoke at the beginning of spectrum of solution, and we see that the new solution has addressed the energy consumption with new way of working consumption. So fortunately, this issue is maybe behind us, except that is not very well known, and sometimes we the second issue, and that has been already said by Andrea and Karen, is to build those consortiums. So we need to be focused on to deliver real impact for the environment, and this is what should drive us. Yeah, and that's maybe the 2 points I would like to mention regarding our next challenges.
Absolutely, that was really insightful. Especially anything that comes to sustainability, utilization of natural resources always excites me, and I'm sure many of the audience will have a lot of things to take from this discussion that we just had. And I also heard about, or rather noted, about the regulatory part that you just hinted upon. If we get time, I'd like to come back to that regulatory part and how it is useful, both how it constrains, and I believe that sometimes the constraints are also levers for innovation. So maybe we can talk about that if we get time. But now let me come to Karen again, and back to you. We started with all the consortia. We talked about the importance of collaboration, and now why don't you take us through or your understanding of what are the top priorities for you as well as the consortia that you mentioned, or rather the live projects that you mentioned, and all the players in your ecosystem, and then continue that with some of the opportunities that are still untapped, that can be that needs or rather which can lure somebody coming new to blockchain.
Yeah. Okay. I I kind of want to touch on what Andre said about, the challenges that he was mentioning of networks, becoming kind of their own little islands. And I think that that's just a reflection of how we're early in this space. It's really only been a handful of years, and you could sit around and wait until there's something out there that everybody's using. But then you won't build up the skills and the experience and the experimentation that helps you understand. And so I think it's almost like it's the occupational hazard of being an early adopter, of being at the forefront, where, if I think companies like Coca-Cola and other large companies have really taken this leadership role in the space, which is, I think, needed in order to push the advancement of the exploration of these kinds of technologies, and not just it's not the technology really, it's the change in business model, is the change in the way you relate to your suppliers or your customers, and the way consortia kind of happens is, you either have someone who is a really big player in that space, take that leap and influence everyone else to come along. That's what Coca-Cola is doing. That's what Walmart is doing. Maersk is doing that, right? These are big companies that are pushing that innovation, or that's one way to do it, right? Another way to do it is you bring a bunch of people to a bunch of companies together, right, and start to build that consortia, with a group. But either way, you got to start somewhere. It has to start with some sort of coming together of people in the industry who are specialized in the knowledge of that industry, right? In the real pain points and relevant use of the technology in that industry. Looking at this, you can't really build these kinds of things generally. There really are a lot of specifics to how certain industries operate, and so that's really important, that kind of specialized knowledge. Like, for example, we had a project that started with a member of Hyperledger, OpenIDL. This is a data solution for the regulatory reporting that insurance companies have to do for the regulators. The data calls that they get. This is something that was started by AAIS, which is a broader association for insurance companies, right? That started as a small POC, and it's very specialized knowledge, right? It's very particular to that industry, what they're doing. And so that project has really progressed and grown, and it's actually become its own project. So OpenIDL launched earlier this year in spring, around March or April, as its own separate project at the Linux Foundation. It's still using Hyperledger Fabric, but they're now essentially building their own consortium with different insurance companies, and bringing in different state regulators and then system integrators, and to all participate in that.
I think that's a good example that you take. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Eventually, it will be useful for that network to connect to, you know, something else that the industry, you know, the insurance industry covers everything, right? And so that's, you know, that's what I think is what's sort of down the line ahead for us. Is you have to start where, you know, where it makes sense for you, and then as that develops and grows, it is going to be more important to see those points of integration and see how we can build bridges across these networks, which will expand the usefulness of it. And so I think it's both sort of a necessary challenge in a way, but I think it just shows, you know, that means that you've been really early. Like there's a, you know, this is a very small part of an industry that's using this technology right now. But you have to start somewhere, and you have to start that network somewhere. And so I think that's, you know, that's part of the experimentation process and the innovation process.
Absolutely. And I think what I was hinting at is, you know, and the two ways you say a typical, or rather a network effect evolves. The first one, which you said, is an influence, or rather an influencer-led, a big company driving innovation and asking others to join, and asking others to gravitate towards its technology. And the other way is you start with, let's say, a consortium first model. And I think for the later one, we have had precedents. I'm not sure if you'll agree, but on the telecom industry, you know, things like a TM Forum or MEF, they had been traditionally doing it, you know, for quite some time, for over a decade now, that have been they were able to build or bring together all the companies together, or rather all the telecom operators together, and drive standardizations. And that is one example that I wanted to bring to the fore. That we have had a precedence of joining, or rather creating collaborations among competitors. And well, that was really insightful, Karen.
Yeah, but so then to touch on your actual question that you asked me, you know, this debate is something that we have at Hyperledger all the time. You know, should in our community, or in our technical steering committee, which is the group of people that's elected each year based on their contributions to Hyperledger technologies, you know, that's a debate at our governing board that happens all the time. Like, should we be converging towards one ledger, or should we continue with this, like, all these different projects? Because we are 16 projects now, right? That's a lot. It can be a lot to just simply understand as an outsider. And I think that it's just a reflection of the stage that we're at in the evolution of blockchain enterprise technology. We're still in this experimentation phase. We're in the early stages. And I do think that we will see more projects coming together to converge or connect and find those integration points. And so I think in terms of goals, is that's something we really want to see and support. Of course, in our community, I think we're always looking to support the community in that kind of cross-pollination, but also in addressing the challenges that they're having with getting out to production. So is it you know, is it something related to you know, the capability doesn't exist yet? Like, for example, for privacy, this is something that's very cutting edge, right? The development of things like ZK snarks and or for interoperability, like hashed time lock solutions. These are the very cutting edge, and they're not there yet, right? And so is that the barrier? What can we do in the meantime? What we're here to do is we're here to support the discussions and the brainstorming and exchange around that. So and Twine was talking a lot about, you know, obviously all the different climate change related issues. You know, we have a climate action special interest group at Hyperledger. This is a public group. Anyone can participate it and join, and Twine, you should come speak at it. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have Andre also come speak, like at our supply chain SIG that we also have as well. And these are basically forums for people to talk about these challenges, talk about what they're doing to solve these problems, and learn from each other. And so that's really what our goal is to help promote, because that will advance, you know, that will advance our goals of enterprise blockchain technologies becoming, you know, more and more prolific throughout, you know, everyday business.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I personally believe that the SIGs that you have, you know, the kind of diverse SIGs that you have are indeed really helpful, especially for a developer who wants to get an insight around what is going around in the world, what others are thinking. The collaboration, the exchange of ideas and thought processes. So yeah, indeed, I personally believe that the SIGs are really, really important. So looking at the time, I would like to ask everyone, you know, Karen, Andre, and Anton, do you have anything else to add? You want to have some one-liner, maybe anything specific that you wanted to add? Otherwise, I would like to start this platform for question and answer. Okay. I don't think anybody has anything else to add. I don't know whether I should go back to all the other questions, some of the interesting topics that we had on regulations, on the convergence of technologies, or on driving collaborations, and can talk a lot. But you know, for the sake of time, let me do this. Let me open this platform for question and answers. If we have some relevant questions touching those topics, I'm sure, looking at Anton's face, I'm sure he'll be very happy to answer them. So will every one of us. Please, so for this, let me open this session for Q&A. Jessica, you may unmute the participants.
While people are waiting to get off mute, you know, I'll just, you know, share a plug for our, you know, our different events and communities. You know, Hyperledger has more than 200 meetups worldwide, and something that has been really great, you know, despite everything with the pandemic, is you know, now you don't have to be in London to go to the Hyperledger London meetup, right? You can attend or present at that meetup anywhere. And so I'd encourage you to find your local meetup and connect with that community. That's a great way to learn. We also have so many use cases and presentations on the Hyperledger YouTube page. You can, you know, spend the rest of eternity to your heart's desire watching some of the sessions from our global forum in this past June, which is our global annual event. And then we do regular sessions all the time. We had yesterday, I was moderating, just like you are, Arka, a webinar that we did on tokenization on Hyperledger Fabric. And it was a pretty popular session. So there's a lot going on in the Hyperledger community, and I encourage people to get involved if they're interested in learning more.
Absolutely. I think some of the questions are there on the chat. I may have some challenges seeing those questions because I'm seeing it on the phone, but let me try nonetheless. So this one is, the demand for blockchain talent is through the roof. How can businesses with traditional models approach this challenge? So who would like to take this question?
I can take the Arka if no one else wants to cover.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely, you know, 2 years ago it was much harder to find, right? So I think a few things to think about is, well, first of all, you know, the protocol is now more developed. You have projects running, so you have the resources who have had POC experience or real production experience on the protocols like Hyperledger Fabric, Sawtooth, and not only in developing the solutions, but how to manage the network. So there's a lot of the DevOps, CI/CD tools and the resources who have done work with the protocols. But now, if you don't have those resources, definitely platforms or protocols like Hyperledger Fabric using the languages that are not new, right? So if you think about you develop a smart contract using the Golang, and smart contract is not the only solution for a blockchain. So you'd build some surrounding services using Node. So there are resources. Maybe if they didn't have experience, they would get one. So it's not a big problem. And then the other part that we're trying to pursue is really partner with local universities, with colleges who are actually studying the blockchain technology. They're preparing the resources who will be working on the protocols. And so we try to partner with them and have maybe some of the internships also done and kind of share what we've done. And then who knows, maybe in a year or two, they'll kind of come back as a already prepared resource for blockchain development.
Sure. Maybe I can add one point from our experience in Suez. I have been impressed by the fact that in the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen a number of tech providers providing easy to implement solution, either from Hyperledger or other type of solution. So we have seen many blockchain as a service provider that could help to start and to kick off a project. At the same time, we realized that implementing a blockchain project also need to work on the other side of the project, meaning how to capture the information, how to give back the information to the end users, because basically what we learned is that user is not really actually using directly the blockchain. That's more a support, a format, a network, and we need to build also those the mobile apps to capture, those IoT platform to capture, those data visualization tool to receive. So that's a combination of solutions that we need to implement to deliver at the end of the day a full experience to our users of the blockchain.
Thank you, thank you. In fact, if I can add a couple of more points over there, indeed, I agree that with somebody like, it is very easy, but there is a lot of fungibility between a Java developer, let's say, coming with a full stack development experience to get him or her retrained or recalibrated into blockchain. And when we have seen that, and what we are doing is we have designed a lot of internal training programs, capability development programs, as well as programs which are in partnership with our some of our trusted partners, and we are constantly able to ramp up our talent development with this kind of fungibility that we see, especially coming from a Java or a full stack development areas. And that is actually a lot of help to us, because indeed there is sometimes a surge of requirement of talents who can be deployed into application development area, system integration areas quickly.
What I would add is, this is a very new space. And so no one has a bachelor's degree in DLT really, right? So everybody is kind of a self-learned in some way. And there's a lot of great training resources out there for you to build up your own talents. It's true that to find experienced blockchain developers is very challenging. So build up your own talent. There's a lot of good courses out there. We have a number of courses. You can go to our website and check them out. We have courses on Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Besu, Indy, Aries. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. We have a certification system as well. So that's one way to learn if you're a developer. Since you're a business with a traditional model, I think part of what you need to do is to really learn about how DLT technologies change that model, how it's going to impact it. And that's what you do by getting engaged. So joining our special interest groups, like you said. So we have capital markets special interest group, trade finance, climate action, health. I said, wherever your business is, join those kind of groups. Attend the meetups, attend the events, so you can just start to understand how your traditionally modeled business might be impacted, might change, and what the opportunities are there. Because that's just as important, or even more important than someone who can code in Solidity. because you got to know that first before you can really get into actually building something.
Yeah, correct.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thanks for sharing those. Is there, I'm sorry, I just realized that I'm finding it difficult to check the Q&A box. But Jessica, if you can help me, if there are any other questions.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
I can see it.
Wonderful. Then we still have some time or not? Or are we just over the top?
We are right at time.
Okay, wonderful. So Jessica, with this, I would like to conclude this panel discussion. And thank you so much, Karen, Anton, and Andre, for sharing your insights and your time. And thank you, Jessica, for handling this logistic of this session. With this, I'll conclude this session.
Thank you
Jessica,
very much, Arka. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you again to Cognizant for making the webinar possible. We really appreciate it. And the recording will be sent to all the attendees afterwards. So you can watch it again if you want.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you all. Bye.